sun is rising and a new day is dawning. A new day filled with hundreds of decisions, some simple and small, and some big and complex. Every decision we make today will either lead us to writing our best life stories, or the decisions we make today will lead us to write a different story, a story that's decidedly less than best. When we make better decisions, we live with fewer regrets. Better decisions, fewer regrets. From sunrise to sunset, the pages of our life story are written by literally hundreds and thousands of decisions that are totally in our control to make. Will I get out of bed, or will I hit the snooze button? What will I eat and drink? Will I exercise today or binge another show on Netflix? Will I choose to save some money today, or will I spend money maybe I don't even have? Our decisions, the little ones and the big ones, fill the pages of our life story, and we own that story because our decisions, yours and mine, they are our stories. This is all true, but there's another truth. Even though our decisions do shape our life stories, we don't get to choose the circumstances in life that require our decisions. If you think about it, your biggest blessings of your life, being an American, your family, even this business environment, it's not a result of your decision. It's simply God's blessing in your life. But God doesn't just allow blessings into our lives. He allows adversity into our lives as well. We do not get to choose all of the adversity we'll encounter in life. However, we still get to decide how to act and react to adversity. We still get to make a decision. And better decisions lead to fewer regrets. The best accept both the blessings and the adversity of life, all that God allows for us, good and not so good. The sun is now up and a new day is dawning. It's November 19th, 2020, and I'm about to write a new chapter in my life story, and so are you. The question is, will it be a chapter worth reading? Better decisions, fewer regrets. Andy Stanley, welcome back to Personal and Professional Best.
It is so good to be back, and it's great to see you, Pat, sorta. We don't really see anybody these days, but this is as close as we've been.
I'll give you a big hug.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Andy, listen, everybody wants to be their personal and professional best in life. I've rarely met anyone when they're asked that question, of course they want to be their personal and professional best. And they want to write their best life story. Unfortunately, all of the data tells us that we all fall short more or less. Our program, we created it intentionally to focus for our own associates and now with the real estate community with our partners to help keep them on the road so that they can achieve and write their best life story. We invited you today because I believe that you can help us all get to where we want to go. So let's get to work, okay?
Yeah, thanks.
All right, you have a new book, Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. What motivated you to write the book?
What motivated me to write the book is when I was young, and in fact, I opened the book with this story. My dad helped me connect the dots between asking good questions and making good decisions. And that's what this book is all about. Our decisions really are no better than the questions that we ask. And not just the questions we ask out loud, because we rarely ask the questions out loud, but there's an internal filter we all have that we run our decisions through. And some of that filter needs to go away. It's not all that helpful, but the relationship between questions we ask and decisions that we make is so important, but it's so overlooked that most of us aren't intentional about employing this very powerful principle. But here's how everybody listening or watching knows this is true. All of us on the backside of a bad decision have either said or thought, I should have asked more questions. And when you think about the business that you're in, Pat, and what your sales associates are doing and what you're doing for customers is, when they're dealing with you, you hope they ask a lot of good questions because it's going to lead them to use your product and to use your sales force because you're great at what you do. And everybody in your organization has met people who are hesitant to go forward with big purchases, real estate purchases, home purchases, because they've been burned in the past. And again, if they were to dig down and you were to ask them enough questions, they would say, yeah, the reason I'm so hesitant, the reason I regret what I did in the past, I should have asked more questions. So in the professional field, personal field, relationships, whatever it might be, there is this extraordinarily important relationship between the questions we ask and the decisions we make. So I wrote this book to basically say, here's 5 questions you should ask every single time you're making any kind of important or, medium-sized decision in your life. And as you said, it's a short book. The questions are simple. It's super accessible. But the decisions we make are no better than the questions that we ask, since you ask.
The simple things in life usually wind up being the most important things in life, and people bypass them. And parents don't usually give a handbook out to their children about how to make the best decisions. And yet decision making winds up, as you've said in your book, it winds up being the cumulative event of our life. We wind up, all the decisions we make, that becomes our life story.
Yeah. Yeah, our decisions really determine the direction and the quality of our lives. And so parents who model good decision making and who model it out loud in front of their kids and then give their kids questions to move through life with, they've just set them up for a better life, because our decisions determine the direction and quality of our life.
One of the pieces of scripture, because I'm a student, was Romans 7:15. I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do.
Yeah.
But what I hate, I do. So it seems like our bend is to make poor decisions in life, and that we have to be intentional to make the best decisions. So if we generally know what the best thing to do, why don't we just do it?
Well, your team can appreciate this. In the book, I talk about the fact that we all have an internal salesperson. And they're constantly this internal salesperson. I've got one, you've got one, we all have got one, who is really, really, really good at selling us on really bad ideas. And so one of the questions, one of the 5 questions we'll get to in just a minute is, am I being honest with myself really? And the reason that's one of the 5 questions is because that internal salesperson is so good. I may not be able to sell anything to anybody else, but I can flat sell myself on some really bad ideas. So one of the things I talk about in the book is this: when you catch yourself selling yourself, you need to hit the brakes, because we rarely have to sell ourselves on a good idea. We always have to sell ourselves, for the most part, on a bad idea. So that internal salesperson, the other thing I say in the book is, if you were in a retail outlet and a sales associate said to you out loud the things that you say to yourself internally, you would be so offended, you would leave the store. I mean, if they said something like this, like, hey, when you get home, if you don't like this product, just donate it. You would be like, what? Or if they said, I see that you already have one of these, but this one's newer. It's like, what kind of sales pitch is that? But those are the kinds of things we tell ourselves all the time. So, part of the problem is not knowing. It's learning not to listen to that internal voice that is so good at selling us on bad ideas.
So you created a process, like a roadmap, about how to go about the process of making the best decisions in life so that you have the fewest regrets. Tell us what the process, the roadmap looks like, Andy.
Well, it's these 5 questions. And I'll just hit the questions for you real quick. The first one I just touched on is, am I being honest with myself? And then you have to pause and say, really, am I being honest with myself? Really? I know what I've told everybody else. I know I've convinced everybody else. I know this is an industry standard. I know this is how, normal operating procedure, but am I being honest with myself? I know I've convinced everybody else, but am I being honest with myself? Pat, you know this. We've both had hundreds and hundreds of employees through the years. And every once in a while, you discover that you've hired a liar, somebody who just can't tell the truth. And eventually you have to fire the liar. Well, we cannot lead ourselves. You can't lead a liar. That's why I have to fire the liar. Well, as long as we're lying to ourselves, we can't lead ourselves. Honesty with ourselves in the mirror is a prerequisite to leading ourselves well. So the first question is, am I being honest? Am I being honest with myself? Really? And I call this the integrity question. The second question is the legacy question. And this is the question I've really drilled down with my children. I have 3 kids, they're all in their 20s. 2 of them are married. And the legacy question is this: What story do I want to tell? What story do I want to tell? And here's what I've told my kids for years. This season of your life is nothing more than a season. And one day you're going to look back on it. And when you look back on this season or this decision or this relationship, and it's nothing more than a story you tell, what story do you want to tell? And of course, we don't think of our lives in terms of stories. We think of our lives in terms of what's right in front of me right now. But every single day, through every decision we make, we are writing the story of our life. So the challenge in this question is, hey, write a story worth telling and write a story worth being told, because one day you're going to tell your kids your story and you don't want to have to skip any chapters. You don't want to have to skip any relationships. And for those who are listening right now and they feel like, yeah, well, I've not written such a good story. Here's the good news. You have the opportunity to begin writing the new chapter right now, and you write the story of your life, and I write the story of my life, one decision at a time. The third question is the conscience question. The conscience question is this: is there a tension that deserves my attention? Is there a tension that deserves my attention? Here's what I mean by that. We've all been there. You're about to make a decision. Everything looks good on paper. Everybody's nodding. Yeah, this looks good. This is how it's always done. Again, this is the industry standard. And as you get close to pulling the trigger on the decision, there's something on the inside. You don't know what it is. You can't put your finger on it. It doesn't make any sense. There's just an inner hesitation. So in the book, I say you need to pay attention to that tension, because when you don't pay attention to that tension, when you rush by it, you brush by it, you allow people to, just sort of quell it, where you're not paying attention anymore, we generally look back with regret. And what happens is if we will pause long enough to allow that tension to rise up on the inside, usually there's some information we've overlooked. Generally, there's an insight we've missed. That's when somebody comes along and says, hey, have you thought about it? And it's like, no, I never thought about that, but there was something on the inside that just didn't seem right. So pay attention to that tension, even if there's no information to support that tension. Then the fourth question, I call the maturity question. And this is a question that, again, my dad raised me on this question, and it's this: what is the wise thing for you to do? Or what is the wise thing for me to do? Not what's the right thing, what's not what's the legal thing, not what's the ethical thing. What is the wise thing for me to do? And I tease this question out in 3 dimensions. In light of my past experience, what's the wise thing for me to do? Because I have a unique past. In light of my current circumstances and state of mind, what's the wise thing for me to do? And in light of my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? Not everybody else, not right, not moral, not ethical. What is the wise thing for me to do? And the reason I call this the maturity question is because our human nature causes us to live right on the line of immoral, unethical, improper. I mean, we just snuggle up right to the line oftentimes, and there's no margin for error. This is how we drive, right? We drive as fast as we can, as fast as the law will allow, without having an encounter with the law. We don't want there to be any margin. And when it comes to driving, maybe not such a big deal, but when it comes to our finances, our morality, our ethics, if we live with no margin, it just takes one simple bad decision to get us in trouble. The other thing I say about this, and this is so important, if you'll think back to your greatest regret, maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was a season of life, your greatest regret, but specifically that moment in time, you would give just about anything to be able to go back and unmake that one decision. It's always true that our greatest regret is preceded by a series of unwise decisions. And that series of unwise decisions led us to the precipice, and then we made that one decision we wish we could go back and make. So the maturity question is, what is the wise thing for me to do? And then the last question, the fifth question, is the relationship question. And this question is a little different than the other 4. The other 4, there is an ROI every single time. There is a return on your investment. If you make wise decisions, your life will be better. If you're honest with yourself, your life's going to be better. If you're writing a story worth telling, what story do you want to tell? Your life's going to be better. The 5th question is different. The 5th question will cost you, but the 5th question is how we change the world. And the 5th question is this: what does love require of me? I know what I think they deserve. I know what they said they would do. I know what she said. I know what he said. I know what they expect. But what does love require of me? This is the question that demands sacrifice, but this is the question that heals and establishes relationships. What does love require of me? So I say to couples, I say to individuals that are having conflict all the time, okay, if you can just pause, step back and say, okay, I know what I want to do. I know what I feel like they deserve. But what does love in this moment require of me? And going back to something you said earlier, Pat, as Christians, as Jesus followers, when we talk about love, we're talking about the love the way that Jesus defined it. He said, I want you to love others, not the way you've been loved or the way you want to love. I want you to love others the way that I have loved you. And then he laid down his life for his friends and for his enemies. And then he says, I want you to extend that kind of love to the people around you. What does love require of me? So the promise of the book and the promise of these 5 questions are, you're going to make better decisions and you're going to live with fewer regrets. And again, I was raised on some of these questions. I've raised my kids on all 5 of these questions. And I'm just so excited I have a little resource to give to people everywhere I go. Today, I was that every time I go through Chick-fil-A, I have a stack of these books. I give my books out to every single person at Chick-fil-A everywhere I go. I gave one to my FedEx, this lady that's normally our FedEx driver. And the next day, she delivered a package. I wasn't home. And she'd written on the receipt, thanks for the book. It was fantastic. So I love giving this book away because it's so practical. And again, our decisions determine the direction and the quality of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, where we are right now, you and me, it's all about every single decision we made, right? Who we married, how we raised our kids, how we invested, how we responded to other people.
Yep.
I want to share you a little story because you talked about your dad and his role in your life and about decisions. I grew up in Miami, Florida. I had 2 older brothers and a younger brother, and my younger brother passed away of a childhood disease. And my mom and dad both had decisions to make. My mom, in her pain, she decided that drinking was going to help her with her pain. And then she left our family. She left a note on the table and called my dad. My older brother said, don't worry, it's going to be okay. I said, how do you know? You're like 12 years old. This is a big crisis. So my dad came home that night, and here's the decision that he made. He said, forgive your mother. She's the only one you'll ever have. Wow. And I'll take care of everything. And he cooked, he cleaned, he laundered, he coached, built a great career in banking. And as I tell him now at 83, that your cooking and your cleaning and your laundering were suspect. But your service and sacrifice to your family was amazing. And then the outcome, like the end of the story, we rescued my mother years later. She's since passed away, but her last 7 years of her life were magnificent because she got recovered. And she got recovered both from alcohol, but she also got recovered and restored with her family. My father, that's his story now, right? His decision, that better decision at that point, led him. My mom lived with regret for an awful long period of her life because of the decisions that she made. So I just hope that people will read the book. We're going to buy a bunch of your books, Andy, and give them out at Chick-fil-A. So they'll probably get multiple copies there if I go there. So relationships are clearly the most important part of all of our lives. I mean, there's other things that are important, money and health and fitness and our careers, but relationships inevitably. And if you're a Christian or not, succeeding in building long-term relationships, the foundation will be you'll learn how to forgive, or you won't have successful long-term relationships because there's no one perfect in this world. And ultimately, you'll have to say you're sorry, or you'll have to say you're forgiven in a relationship. You're going to keep it. Since this is kind of a topic that's in your wheelhouse, is the better decision always to forgive others who hurt us?
Yeah. But Pat, I'm glad you couched it that way, because forgiveness, a lot of people don't understand forgiveness. And I understand that forgiveness isn't a feeling, and forgiveness does not require us to move back into a relationship. And this is so important because I think sometimes, I know for a fact, sometimes people are like, I don't want to forgive him. I don't want to forgive her, because they assume that means if I forgive, I have to move back into the relationship. And that is not true. Forgiveness is a decision going back to our topic, forgiveness is a decision to cancel a debt. That's what forgiveness is. It's a decision to say, you know what? You don't owe me anymore. You stole my reputation. You don't owe me a reputation. You stole my childhood. You don't owe me a childhood, because of course they can't pay most things back anyway, relationally. It's deciding to cancel the debt. And in some way, this is what your father did. I mean, he could have made the case that his wife, your mom, owed him. You could have made the case, my mom owed me. She did. She owed you to be present, to be there to raise you. Forgiveness is, you know what? I'm deciding to cancel that debt. Now, in your case, you had the privilege ultimately, through the grace that you and your brother and your father extended to your mom, to enter back into that relationship. But for many people, it's not safe. There are some unsafe relationships. So consequently, you always forgive, you cancel the debt, but then you use wisdom and you listen to the wise counsel of others to determine whether or not to move back in the other person's direction. So again, to be clear, forgiveness does not require reconciliation. Forgiveness is, I'm going to cancel the debt. You don't owe me anymore. And then in some cases, there's reconciliation. In some cases, there's never reconciliation, because of course that depends on the other person. But forgiveness purifies our hearts, it cleanses our hearts. And you know what it does, Pat? It allows us to leave that part of the past behind us that we need to leave behind us. And I would just add this, our past should remind us, but our past does not have to define us. And the people who are willing to forgive are the people who are willing to learn from their past and move on. People who hang on to that anger and bitterness, they carry that into their future. And consequently, it oftentimes haunts them the rest of their lives, and it shows up in future relationships. So absolutely, forgiveness is imperative. But I would also say this as a caveat, the timing is important. I think sometimes people try to forgive too soon, too quick. They feel, oh, I need to forgive. Sometimes anger needs to incubate a little bit. Our frustration and our hurt, we need to sit in it a little bit to let it, to experience all of it. But at some point, it's time to say, you know what? You don't owe me anymore. And that's where the freedom comes. And apparently, not apparently, your story is an extraordinary story of that very scenario.
Yeah, when I cross paths with parents that are either divorced or separated, I always remind them to make sure that they don't embitter their kids with the relationship issues that they had together, because I watched it happen in my own family. Yep. My two brothers and I are amazingly great and close together, and my dad and I are close together. And again, we watched the healing of my mom take place. It was an amazing story. So whether you're Christian or not, the concept of forgiveness, as Andy just described, is really powerful. You'll be much better in relationships. So I love 3 stories in Scripture. I love a lot of the stories in Scripture, but King David is a great story because, of course, King David made some not so good decisions during the course of his life. Paul made some not so good decisions, and certainly Peter. I didn't watch Jesus walk on water. He did, and he made some poor decisions. But the end of those stories are magnificent, right? So I wonder if you could encourage folks that are here today who've made some not so good decisions and are facing consequences, or that pain and shame from the past is still with them. Maybe you can encourage them to think about writing the rest of their story and making that their very best.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I say that, I talk a lot about this in the book, actually, is that your current story is not the entire story. And your current chapter is just a chapter. And the way you know this, it's hard for us to see this in the mirror, because when we're dealing with consequences, whether it's debt or relational consequences or physical consequences of decisions we've made, it's so right in front of us. It's all we can see. But when you think about other people, you know what I'm saying is true, because you know people who have moved beyond. In fact, you've met some people that seem so healthy and so together, and then you hear their story and you're thinking, wow, you don't even seem like you're that person. And they would say, well, I'm not that person anymore. And you know what they did? They decided a better story. And that's the opportunity every single one of us has every single day of our lives. We get to decide the story of our lives, and we get to decide the story that we want to tell and that we want told about us. And again, our past, it should remind us, it should not, and it does not have to define us. So the good news is we wake up every single day with new mercy and new grace, and we decide our way forward. But to do that, going back to what Pat just surfaced, which is so important, for our past not to sneak up into our future, the discipline and decision of forgiveness is, for some of us, it's a daily thing, because there are people in our lives who hurt us on a daily basis. So to keep our conscience clear and to keep our heart clean, the discipline or decision to forgive is part of being able to move forward with our lives.
So let's move on to a couple of other, what I think are really important topics. The scripture tells us, and Abraham Lincoln reminded all of us, that a nation divided or a house divided against itself cannot stand. Of course, we're all living in this time in America today where it feels like, whether it's more divided than it ever been or it has ever been, it feels like it is. And we developed a creed this year at Supreme, Andy, with this kind of atmosphere in mind, and that is that I'm for everyone, not for everything, but I'm still for everyone. Yep. And that's kind of what we've been communicating all year long, so that we can look past the differences that we have with other people, yep, whether it's believer or not, or party or not. So now that the election is over and it seems like our house is divided, what do you recommend each one of us do, taking responsibility to make this nation less divided, make it better?
Well, I think the statement that you've crafted for Supreme is fantastic. And I think, Republican, Democrat, left or right, realizing we're all precious in his sight, we all have way more in common than not. We don't feel that right now, but we all have way more in common than not. We all wake up in the morning. We want to get our families off to school. We want to make sure our kids are taken care of. Our marriages are taken care of. We have so much in common. And the way I've said that to our churches is this: what's best for people is what's best. And we may not agree on what's best for people, but we have to agree that what's best for people is what's best. So there again, there's so much common ground. And the thing, this is just my opinion, but you brought it up, the thing that's dividing us right now is the conversation. It's not the reality. And reality, we both live in Atlanta, and we've, recently, I'm sure both of us have experienced that new interchange at Georgia 400 and 285, and it's, every time I drive through there, it's a phenomenal picture of engineering, of construction. And every time I drive through there, I say to Sandra, see, we're not divided. Look what we're doing. The fact, and this is just one interchange under construction in one city, the fact that all these people can come together, they don't care what religion each other are. They don't care if they go to church. They don't care who they voted for. Look at what we are able to do. We are not divided. We're divided in our dialogue. We're divided in our ideas. But in terms of what we wake up in the morning and come together to do all over this country and all over the world, we have so much in common. And if we can just remember what's most important is what's best for people. And we can yickety-yak and argue about what's best for people. But at the end of the day, what's best for people is what's best. And what's best for people is what's most important. And I think that is in pretty much everyone's hearts. So I'm not worried. And, I have very strong political persuasion or, opinions like you do, and like probably everybody watching does. But at the end of the day, you know what? We can, as I say to our church, we can disagree politically and love unconditionally. We can disagree politically. We can love unconditionally. What does love require of me? And love requires of me that I set aside my party opinions when you have a need and when there's something I can do for you. And I think most people feel that way. And actually, that's how most people operate on a day-to-day basis. So I think once we move past this season, we'll discover more of what we have in common than perhaps is apparent right now.
I just hope this season doesn't last like the election doesn't last for like another season until next election. Yep. I thought it would be over a week ago. We could move forward, right, one way or the other. I sourced that I'm for everyone, not for everything. I sourced it because God is for us. He's not for everything that we do, but he is still for us. And of course, the stories in scripture that we just talked about, King David and Paul and Peter, he always was for them and never gave up on them. And I just feel very much like if we can all just have a perspective to be for people. And,
Yep.
and to your point, I think we are, and we do so much great things together. All right, listen,
Yeah.
you taught us now the roadmap on how to make the better decisions in life. And we so appreciate you being here with us today to do that. And, I only wish that I would have had that roadmap years and years and years ago. My dad, as I shared, set a great example in life for certain things to do, certain decisions to make, like to forgive people. But the practical side of it is that now that people have the roadmap and you've given it to us, you're the author of the roadmap. I've got a last question for you. So we're going to make the world a better place together. I'm for you, Andy. I'm not for everything.
I have a feeling we should end the conversation now before whatever it is you're about to ask me. I can see it in your eyes, even on the camera. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So I'm for you. I'm just not for everything. We're just going to prove that point, right? So $5,000 or $10,000 to your favorite charity. All you have to do is get it right. The decision. Who wins this year's Auburn and Alabama football game?
Is there any possibility at all that Auburn could beat Alabama this year? I was kind of praying that there would be this big COVID breakout at either Auburn or Alabama, and they'd have to cancel the game. Actually, maybe cancel the rest of Auburn's season. I don't know. So, if I had to bet, I'm afraid. I mean, I have, 2 kids that graduated from Auburn, and where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And I sent a lot of treasure to, to Auburn. So, but I'm afraid I'd have to place my bet on Alabama this year, as hard as that is for me to say. Nobody's going to hear this but me and you, right? This is between the two of us. No. Yeah.
You know what? I love that you
save your money. That's not even close.
You wrote the book, you talked the talk, and you just walked the walk, because it was hard to do what you just did, but you did it. My treasure went to Alabama. That's why I'm a fan of Alabama. But we're still for each other no matter what, even on that day of the game. Hey, Andy, thank you so much for what you've done for my family. My wife's life changed when she sat at North Point for the first time. It was a fascinating experience because she cried the entire time you were talking, and then she asked if we could come back next week, which I'm sure other people have had that experience, but you have a unique gift to be able to communicate, that, and others have been impacted by it. So on behalf of my family, the Flood family, and so many other families, I want to say thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And best of luck in the rest of the year, and God bless you and the Stanley family.
You too. Hey, and thanks for what you're doing in the community and the integrity that you bring to that industry, and how you represent not just yourself, but the company, and how you represent your faith in the community, Pat. That means a lot to me, and it's been fun to watch that in you through the years. So thanks for this opportunity, and I hope to see you in the real world, in real life before too long.
Me too. Thanks, Andy.
Wow. Thank you, Andy, for joining us today and offering the incredible wisdom that you shared. Better decisions, fewer regrets. I hope that all of you feel inspired and educated by watching today's program. Each of us has the ability to decide to write a better story for our lives. One of the bits of wisdom that resonated with me today was how Andy described forgiveness. He defined it in terms that we should all understand when he said that forgiveness is deciding to forgive someone else's debt. At Supreme Lending, we're in the mortgage business. We are very familiar with that. We help our customers purchase homes by lending them money that they can slowly repay. Can you imagine how ecstatic you'd feel if someone told you that the debt of your mortgage had been forgiven? How grateful would you be if someone forgave your mortgage? Now, we're not going to be doing that at Supreme, but guess what? That's exactly how it feels when we receive and offer forgiveness. On this program, we often talk about the power of thankfulness. Just this week, we spoke about how thankfulness unlocks our best lives, physically, mentally, and spiritually. If we accept the truth that being thankful unlocks our best, what is holding us back from deciding to be thankful? I'd like to humbly offer that the debt of unforgiveness just might be what's holding you back from truly living a life of thankfulness. So today, I have a challenge for you. I want this to be your best Thanksgiving ever. In fact, I want you to enter a new season of life marked by thankfulness. To get there, I want you to join me in deciding two things. First, decide today to ask forgiveness of anyone that you've hurt. Start with your spouse and your family. You cannot demand forgiveness, but you can pave the way for forgiveness by sincerely apologizing to those you've hurt. Second, choose today to forgive all of those that have hurt you. Forgive them their debt. If you're a person of faith, this isn't optional. Jesus showed us the way in the Lord's Prayer when he said, "Forgive us our debt as we forgive our debtors." And by the way, even if you're not Christian, forgive. It works. Today, I'm recommitting to a life of thanksgiving. It's not just a better way, it's the best way. We talk often on this program about Destination Best. Guess what? Thankfulness is that destination. If you commit these two exercises of forgiveness right now, I promise you, despite the challenges we've all faced this year, 2020 will mark the beginning of the best chapter of your life. Our best is waiting, and I look forward to meeting you there.